Right, thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, Brandon, and the Syspro team. Brandon, you asked me to touch very briefly on the customer experience and then touch on innovation over the past 13 years. So what I'm going to attempt to do today, without getting too technical, is talk about the experience that we at Bidvest had with Syspro over the past 13 years. So just an indication of what I'd like to cover, just a high-level overview of the organizational overview, Bidvest itself. I think many of you are familiar with the group. That doesn't take much introduction, but I'll give you just an overview of the complexities that actually comes with an organization like Bidvest. I'd like to talk to you about the customer experience, the journey map that we actually followed over the past 13 years, and those 13 years still continue with Syspro. A lot of that was shared by some of the previous panelists in terms of the ups and downs, but we'll take you through that. I'll touch briefly on disruption and innovation, but I don't want to go through the stuff that everybody's heard already. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually keep it as close to Syspro as possible. Thank you, Rohit, for the information on data. I was going to talk a little bit about data, but I've actually pulled that out of the slides. Because I think you did a very good job in terms of showing what the capabilities of data is moving into the future. I'll also then touch briefly on what Gartner has to say about a customer experience. So let's just look at my personal overview. Brandon was quite correct. I started in the RMB stable, First National Bank, as CEO for group procurement. That took me up until about 2008. I then joined Bidvest. I think for those of you that can remember, 2008, 2009 was the financial crunch. So we started seeing a lot of banks folding, and with the banks folding came a lot of limitations and restrictions. We were working as part of an innovation hub at that point in time. I felt those limitations to be too restricting, and the opportunity to actually join Bidvest came along. So I became managing director and set up Bidvest Group Procurement roughly 13 years ago. One of the nice things in that exercise was I was offered the position by our chief executive officer at that point in time, Brian, to go and run the Brazilian World Cup. So it was an extremely daunting task. But the bottom line was that we actually managed to run a very, very successful Confederation Cup in 2013 and an extremely successful World Cup, Brazilian World Cup in 2014. The result of that was that we were able to actually recoup losses that were incurred in the 2010 World Cup, and in 2016, 2017, Bidvest sold their stake in the hospitality company that provided services to the World Cup. Just a brief overview of Bidvest itself, for those of you that don't know. It is a global company, so there are very few places that you can actually go in the world where you don't actually touch on some of the services offered by Bidvest. Massive, massive divisions. So we've got finance, we've got automotive, we've got commercial, we've got services, we've got freight, we've got branded products. And within those divisions, we've got in excess of 300 companies. Now, what makes Bidvest quite complex is it's not an autocratic organization. It's very, very much a federated entity. And what that means is every single division and most companies have the ability to make their own decisions. So when you start talking about ERP systems, when you talk about IT systems, when you talk about business strategy, the word centralized almost becomes, well, it definitely is taboo. Because what happens is those companies do what's best for the organization to survive and to actually excel into the future. Now, it is a very successful company. And I think that what we've seen is that autonomy and that agility and that non-bureaucratic environment is what's made it a large contributor on the JSE as we know it today. In 2016, the group split. Well, I wouldn't say split, probably more unbundled. And what we had was, we had two entities being listed on the JSE. The one entity was Bidvest Services, and the other one was Bidvest Food, which is now known as Bidcorp. And I think in their own right, for those of you that actually follow equities, is both of those entities on the JSE are doing exceptionally well. So I think if you look at the contribution in terms of profits, the size of what we're talking about, services, branded products, a massive contributor to the revenues, freight, commercial products, financial services, and automotive. So it's an environment where I think there's very few places you can drive in South Africa without actually driving into a Bidvest vehicle or some presence of sort. So talking about the customer experience, what was nice about this 13-year journey is that it actually extends beyond 13 years. And what really makes it good is that myself, as well as the team, even though Syspro has changed, myself and my team were part of this journey for the entire 13 years. And obviously, this journey will continue, even though the entity as we had it then, Bidvest Procurement, it does no longer exist. I think that given what we've actually seen coming out of customer experience, Syspro will no doubtedly have a relationship with all of the organizations and the entities that I mentioned to ensure continuity. So in the beginning, let me just take you through, right in the beginning, some of the qualities that we identified. And I'm not really talking about the technology qualities, because a lot of that has already been mentioned by the other companies and the panelists. But what we identified quite early on in the relationship was for them to actually, and this is Syspro, to look beyond price. They looked at the long-term objectives, and what they wanted to do was ultimately get enterprise, or the Syspro enterprise system, into Bidvest and scale it within the Bidvest environment. They weren't looking at short-term gains. Again, I think that was something that we possibly did see in the beginning of the relationship, but they were actually looking for the sustainability and the long-term benefits. And what we started seeing at that point in time was their focus on service levels. So let me just take you through a journey map, a little bit of a black hole to start with. So let's go back to the 2009 kind of starting period. We started seeing from the data that we were collecting that Syspro was definitely making inroads into the group. And I don't want to be controversial or contradictory in any way, but the approach that they adopted was very much a shotgun approach into Bidvest itself, rather than a targeted approach. We established relationships with the Syspro executive. After many months, I would say probably after about 12 months of analyzing our data, we started looking for the key individuals within Syspro. And what we wanted to do was establish a more sustainable relationship where they had a focus on the group as a whole. One of the key starting points, and this takes us right through to 2011, was that we were able to actually ultimately get them not to see Bidvest as fragmented little companies or entities within their group, rather as companies that were looking at the ERP system and implementing it as a solution into the Bidvest environment. So that was one of the highs, and probably one of the milestones early on in our relationship, was to establish that commercial agreement. And that commercial agreement has worked its way through up until today. One of the things that actually, again, dragged the relationship down a little was that there was no account management structure. So even though we'd had the commercial arrangement in place, there wasn't a structure that could really support Bidvest on a national basis. So we started working on putting a structure together, or focus at least, on getting the people together to start focusing on our national footprint. That was a little bit of a low at that point in time, but then we were able to actually appoint a key account manager, but again on a very loose basis. And that key account manager was Bradley Polly at that stage. And that's when we started seeing traction taking place within the group again. It worked quite well for quite a number of years. We had a good focus, and there was a national footprint, operational meetings, together with Bradley and the executive, in putting Bidvest onto the map as far as Syspro was concerned, or vice versa. We then ran into a little bit of a crunch again many years later. We lost the account managers, and also what we started seeing, and I think Lewis mentioned this in the beginning, there were some integration issues that we started running into with certain companies. And because of the lack or fragmented approach in terms of the operational sessions, it took a lot of focus to bring these people, the key stakeholders together to get business back on track again. Thank goodness at that point in time, and we're going now to 2016, Mark Wilson came on board, and we started seeing some significant changes in terms of the customer relationship itself. Mark played a far more strategic role and far more a hands-on role in terms of bringing Syspro to the customer. Brandon Shaban was a breath of fresh air. That happened in 2019, and he was appointed the strategic sales and key account manager for the group. Now, a lot of good things actually started dropping out of the appointment of Mark and Brandon. So some of the issues that we started focusing on was operational meetings, not only operational meetings at a group level, but we started seeing more operational meetings taking place at company level as well as at divisional level and across the country. Now, just having mentioned the complexity of the group and the footprint, I think you yourselves can imagine how complex it is just to manage operational meetings in different parts of the country on a monthly or quarterly or biannual basis. Some of the other interesting things that we saw dropping out of that relationship was the fact that we started seeing more Syspro events. So we started getting more invites to some of the events that were strategic in nature. So it wasn't sales driven, it was more strategic in nature. This event is one of those events that we're actually talking about today. We also started seeing some of the innovation popping through. So we saw the Espresso app coming on board. And because of all of these initiatives that we saw coming out of a fresh team, we find ourselves in the situation today where we have in excess of 1,000 users, multiple divisions, and multiple companies. So we've got Syspro embedded in about 130 plus entities within the Bidvest environment, which I think is quite an achievement, and that continues. So what we're seeing is we're not seeing any moves away, and again, I think some of the panelists and the other companies are saying how they want to further embed and entrench themselves in Syspro, utilizing a lot of the innovation that actually comes out of the enterprise system. So that probably leads me on to what Brandon's asked me to talk about, a little bit about innovation. There's very little that can be said about disruption or innovation. So what I did is I rather went and looked and tried to find out what is the meaning of disruption. And the meaning of disruption really is radical change to an existing industry or market due to technological innovation. I'm not going to elaborate on any of that, but I think if we look at innovation, we can talk about Uber, we talk about Waze, we can look at what's happened from a Tesla perspective. There's Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, there's 3D printing, there's robotics from a prosthetics point of view. Rohit has already started touching on what we're starting to see within the Syspro environments, AI and elsewhere as well. We talk about bots. We can talk about takealot.com. So I think there are very few places that we can actually move to where we're not actually seeing disruption taking place on a far more regular basis. Innovation and disruption confuses me slightly. So if we look at innovation, the meaning here is crucial to the continuing success of any organization. So if we go and look at innovative solutions, I think wind power, instead of combustion, electricity, solar power. If we look at Coca-Cola, for example, which is 130 years old, and they're continuing of them to having to broaden their product range to stay relevant. There's Cadbury's, which we know is chocolate, but now they're actually going into beverages and a whole host of things. And I think something that can resonate with us, and I've only chosen two kinds of environments, but if we look at F&B, your bank is no longer a branch. Your bank is something that you've actually got in your pocket. And I think we're starting to see a lot more innovation and disruption taking place in environments like this that are driven by technology. There's Capitec, which was an unheard of organization wanting to penetrate into the market. Now Capitec finds themselves as one of the big fives. And I don't want to exclude Syspro from that. So what I'd like to do, and I don't want to be challenged by technology here, but is just take you through two short videos in terms of what we're seeing coming out of Syspro themselves.
What the architecture team do doesn't often seem very sexy. Our job is to create a fast, reliable, trusted environment for the rest of our development team to use. As you know, ERP is mission critical. Like a bank, any outage can have a significant downstream effect. Our customers, we have a 95% retention rate, and many of those are either growing or making more efficient use of the resources, and sometimes both. It's very important, therefore, that we take the most advantage of that. We don't decide our own things. We actually listen to what our customers say, both now and what they need into the future. We look at things in a sustainable way. We're looking at competitive, real-world functionality that they can actually use right now. We believe in the right technology at the right time. We're often looking years into the future, so that even if you're not ready for the technology right now, we'll be ready when you are. Well, the majority of our customers are running on-premise currently, but they're looking to the cloud in future. We have a significant number of customers who are using the Microsoft Azure platform, providing great scalability and great performance. But our customers want actionable insights that they can see at a glance on their screen. They want web views, tiles, and other information that allows them to make decisions right then and there and action them straight away.
As technology advances, here at Syspro, we strive to find the right technology to use at the right time. One of the biggest things hitting the social media arena right now is something known as a bot. A bot is a digital citizen that sits in the background and is able to interact with users in a consistent manner. Syspro, in the Innovation Lab, have come up with something called a Syspro bot. The Syspro bot can actually reside in Skype, Twitter, Facebook, and pretty much almost any social media platform, giving the user the ability to choose the platform that he would like to interact with the ERP application. So as you can see in Skype, I have a new contact and it's called the Syspro bot. And you interact with him as you would interact with a contact in Skype. So what I'm going to say is, hello bot. And what this will do is send a message off to the bot, and the bot will then respond to me. In this particular case, this particular bot actually can provide 3 pieces of functionality or provide 3 services to the user. It can provide a price query, a stock lookup, and an order status query. So I'm just going to go ahead and instead of typing the entire word, I'm simply going to type in the word price. The reason why I don't have to type in the entire word is what we're using in the background is called natural language understanding, where whatever the user types in, we can then take that, convert it into a natural language understanding, and pass that instruction off to the bot. The bot then comes back to me and says, please tell me the stock code you're interested in. And I can go ahead and say a 100. The bot will then validate that the stock code is correct, and will then ask me for a customer number to provide a more accurate quote. So I'm simply going to put customer number 1 in. Keeping in mind that when interacting with the bot through Skype, you can not only do it from your desktop, you could do it from your mobile device, whether it be a phone, whether it be on iOS. You could do the same sort of functionality when working in Facebook Messenger as well. So the bot then comes back to me and says, how many would you like to be quoted for? And I'll simply go 5. What will happen in the background is the bot will now start interacting with the core Syspro ERP infrastructure, calculating the price for that particular item, as well as providing a total for that particular order. The next thing you can do is use your mouse, because these buttons are actually interactive now within Skype. So I can simply click on the yes button, and now what the system's going to do is going to take that particular stock code for that particular customer and automatically create a new order for you. And now the order that's been returned to us is order number 1152. We can do exactly the same with the same code base directly within Syspro. So within Syspro, we've hosted a bot in an HTML5 user interface, and I can simply type in hi. And similarly, because we are now sitting inside an HTML5 infrastructure inside Syspro, I could again type in price, or you'll notice now I have 1 there as a shortcut. I could do order status query for number 3, and previously in Skype we added an order. It was 1151. So in Syspro, what I could do right now is the bot's now asking me for a sales order number, and I can simply type in 1151. The bot will then go off to the Syspro database, make a query depending on your permissions, and then actually tell you the status of the order, how many lines are in the order, and what the value of the order is. Customers using Syspro is going to be able to expose this bot to their customers from a self-service point of view. They are able to interact with the bot and get a consistent customer delivery or customer expectations.
All right, so if we take, the reason why I put those 2 videos up there is because in the first video, we were talking about technology, but what we heard was the customer experience. So coming from that was technology, but more in light of what is it that the customer wants. So the key points that I've actually summarized out of those 2 videos is number 1, we're talking about customer experience. And then the other side, we're actually talking about innovation and technology. And what was amazing about it is it came across as almost a business discussion. It never came across as a tech discussion. So when we talk about customer experience, we heard the words retention. We spoke about needs. We spoke about trusted, social media, innovation lab, bots. We spoke about a number of issues like flexibility. And if I listen to the speakers this morning, what I'm hearing is a lot of what we're actually seeing on the screen today already was vocalized by a lot of the users utilizing that system and what's made their companies successes. So what I'm almost wanting to do is start saying that you can talk about innovation, you can talk about disruption, but unless the 2 are linked almost at the hip or at the shoulders, you're going to have problems into the future. So if we look at those same words, if we take the same issues that were mentioned and we look at what Gartner has to say about it, Gartner very much expresses exactly the same sentiment. So if we're talking about a customer-centric organization, a lot of the points that actually were mentioned by both the speakers coming out of the video and also the previous panelists, we see that actually rates quite highly, number 1 in Syspro, but number 2, it ranks very highly in terms of the habits of customer-centric organizations, if you look at what Gartner has to say. Now, I don't want to talk about data, but I think weren't it for the fact that we were able to utilize data within the Bidvest environment, it would have been extremely difficult to have put that journey map together with its ups and downs. So what we did to a large extent was we utilized all our own internal information, general ledger extracts. Unfortunately, the entire group is not on Syspro, but we were able to actually get extracts from multiple enterprise systems. We were able to actually identify and look at what the spend data looked like. We combined that with market data relating to Syspro itself. We looked at partner data from Syspro. We looked at the billing information. We looked at the services that were implemented, and obviously not all the same services are implemented within the Bidvest environment. So we had a very good idea of what services were implemented. We actually looked at the service levels, but at the same time, we also looked at the health of Syspro. Now, you can't take for granted that when you're dealing with a large organization, that everything will be smooth running in the future. So what we tended to do was actually keep an exposure matrix on hand at all times. Now, we called, if you can recall, the problems that we ran into from a Microsoft point of view with then EOH, and obviously they've moved on from them. But we were able to actually call the problems utilizing this exposure matrix. We also utilized the same exposure matrix when we started seeing breaches, for example, in the Experian environment. So we did a very similar thing for all our strategic partners. So we could actually have a look at what was the performance like on a year-on-year basis, what did the spend look like within that particular environment and with the strategic partner. We had certain comments that we would actually feed up to the audit team or to strategic providers or users of the system. We could see who were the top spend. Now, the only reason why we're looking at top spend and not licenses is because we can get a good idea of what that utilization looked like from a Syspro perspective within the Bidvest environment. We could also have a look at what the spend looked like in terms of the top 10 growing companies. And then what we would do is based on market insights and information that we gathered internally as well as externally, what we would do is we'd actually risk assess the company or the strategic partner that we were dealing with. And this information would be shared with the entire organization or with key entities with the entire organization. So you can see from that everything looked green. That I don't want to over emphasize or exaggerate the fact that there are definitely problems that do occur. But if you're going to pull out the problems, the most important thing is that you've actually got people that are very quick and agile to respond to the problems as far as your enterprise system is concerned. And that's what we saw coming from Brandon and Mark and the team over the past couple of years since 2019, 2016. And I think that's actually stood, number one, Syspro in very good stead as far as the group is concerned, Bidvest is concerned. And I think what we're seeing is that the licenses continue to grow. We don't see major exodus from the Syspro environment. And help me, Brandon, if I'm wrong, you do have your challenges. But again, I think what we have seen is we've seen a lot more positives than negatives over the past couple of years. So if I look at customer experience, I want to say that it's probably going to be a symbiotic relationship. You can have as much innovation as what you want. You can have as much disruption as what you want. You can have as many bots working on your system as possible. But unless you've actually got that positive experience that you get from the account management, the executive team, and from the account managers, I think ultimately what you will see is you'll see a reduction in licenses. You'll see a reduction in the use of the product. And ultimately, I think what you'll start seeing is the evaluation of other products and ultimately the replacement of your own product or service, should there not be this emphasis on the customer experience itself. So I think that is all I have from my side, Brandon, Mark, and for your guests.